Well, thank you. I don't think we can sing and we cannot play the violin, but I think we know something about mobile, and we're going to try to share that with you. What I thought we could do to get started, maybe, Cory, you would like to introduce yourself, and if you'd like, start with that story of sort of the near-death transformation of Facebook, which I think is so fascinating because, as we know, Facebook had a time in which it went public, the stock tanked, and we were all worried. And now the stock is thriving, the company is mobile, and here's the man greatly responsible for this. So I thought it would be a good idea for all of you to meet him and for him to tell us more details about that story.
Well, thank you for that introduction. We were never worried. So I'm a vice president of engineering at Facebook, and for the last 2 years, I've been running the mobile product group at Facebook. And so that's mobile engineering and mobile product development. So the core apps on iOS and Android, the core technology behind those applications, the product infrastructure, and generally trying to take those apps from where we were 2 years ago. So how many of you used Facebook on a mobile device 2 years ago? So do you remember 2 years ago? So for those who maybe don't remember just how fantastic the product was 2 years ago, we had a product that was used by many of you, which was fantastic. It's a wonderful place to be, to have an application that's important to people and a big part of their lives. And we had made a bet on HTML5, and we talked about this bet. We talked about how wonderful it was going to be, and it really only had, 3 minor problems. One, it was slow. 2, it crashed a lot, and 3, people hated it. And so other than those 3 minor defects, we were fine. And so at the time I was working on the platform team, and Shrep, the then VP of engineering and now CTO, came to me and said, "Can you fix mobile?" And I gave him the honest answer of, "I don't know." And he liked that answer and said, "Well, go do it." And about 2 years ago, we really started rebuilding our apps. And what we found as I dug in, and this is something that I suspect many of you who are dealing with the mobile transition are going through yourselves, is that you can get in a situation where you have a very strong team, great technical, great design, great product, who have made bad decisions and are stuck. And they're writing problems and creating problems as fast as they can fix them. And so at that point, you have to tell them to take a step back and ask them to define what the problem is. And for us, it was we didn't know how to do native mobile development well. We were, and continue to be, completely world-class on web development. Facebook was built on how can you build a web page faster than anyone else.
If I might interrupt there, I thought it was interesting because having such a young founder as Mark Zuckerberg, he still was a web generation person.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Mark has said more recently that had Facebook been started in 2008, it would have been started as an iOS app. Because you think about Facebook as a product, and we were talking before about, like, all of us are used to this massive mobile transition, this movement of where you get access to technology and information to phones. But Facebook had a second driver pushing the mobile transition, which is fundamentally Facebook is a much better product on mobile. Now, like, I have friends who will go to a party or social event and pull out a laptop and begin posting, but my friends are engineers. We're not normal, right? And so normal people, all of you fine folks, you carry a phone. And so we had these dual drivers where it's a better product on mobile, and in general, computation was moving to mobile. And so for us, it became a challenge both of changing technology, but also institutional change, because we had been so based on being faster and better at mobile web development than anyone else, that we didn't have the right instincts for the cost of mobile development, the risks of a mistake on mobile development, and the impact of this change. And one example would be, in hiring engineers, we realized we didn't have any native iOS developers at the company. We had literally 3 at the point that we started this transition out of 600 or so engineers. And that seemed preposterous. You'd think blind chance would have hired more iOS developers than 3. And we discovered that, in fact, our hiring process was filtering out iOS developers, because we were asking them questions that were perfect for web developers, but in fact actively destructive for iOS developers. And so you'd ask an engineer who wants to do client work to redesign some web service. They'd first say they're not interested in that piece, and then two, that they don't know how to do it. And so the interview report would be like, well, they're stupid and they have a bad attitude. And so then you don't hire any of those people. And so we actually had to change our hiring pipeline to bring in people with this expertise. And so 2 years ago, we embarked on a rewrite. For any of you who have been involved with rewriting software, it's a very exciting moment. The valley is full of smoking craters of companies that tried to do rewrites. And so for us, it was, how do we reduce risk? How do we move very, very quickly with this rewrite? And about 3 months after we started, we had a prototype we were starting to live with. And 7 months after the original rewrite kicked off, we had launched the iOS app, and then followed that with substantial changes to the Android app, changes to how we did product development overall. And as of 3 weeks ago, we don't have a mobile team anymore. So the complete transition for us of 2 years was...
I'm sorry, can you clarify that? So what do you mean you don't have a mobile team anymore?
So 2 years ago, the mobile team at Facebook was 10 people trying to duplicate all of Facebook. So their goal was just do what all the 600 other engineers are doing. Over the last 2 years, we trained, we hired, and we got all of the other product teams involved with doing mobile development. And what became clear is that mobile is more than half of everything we do. So the idea that it would be an exception is just preposterous, because mobile will be forever going forward the dominant place that we do development at Facebook. And so it became obvious to Mark and to me that we didn't need a mobile team anymore, that we had fully distributed all this development out to all the other teams. And this is something that I think for many companies going through the mobile transition, they will follow a similar sequence, where you know you've completed the transition when you no longer have a team marked as your mobile team.
And the Instagram acquisition, right? How is that integrating into all of Facebook? And wasn't that really the realization that you say, hey, here's a mobile-only company that's done so incredibly well? How did you bring them in, and how was that integration?
Well, one of the biggest challenges whenever you do an acquisition, like what gets all the news in an acquisition is the term sheet, you know, the scuttlebutt about how the negotiations went. But the actual challenge of an acquisition is making the team successful once they come in the door. And with Instagram, you know, we had, you know, an incredible leader in Kevin, we had an incredible product, and a determination on our side to not mess that up. And so we viewed it as, how do we simply accelerate Instagram and help them do things that, frankly, maybe they didn't want to be doing. And an obvious example was Facebook. We spend a tremendous amount of time figuring out how to deal with abusive or spammy information on the site. And we built very, very generic systems for doing this. And so we were able to just hand to Instagram, hey, why don't you plug your system into this, and we'll be able to reduce your spam. Come use our infrastructure. It's cheaper and better than your infrastructure. But in doing that, we were very careful to not have Instagram pay a strategy tax for being part of Facebook. Now, what happened that was even better than that is, because the Instagram team is frankly a fantastic group of people, we immediately started getting engineers together and product designers together and started sharing notes on what had worked and what hadn't. And so you can actually see the influence both in the code both ways, to design decisions on both sides, you know, especially on Android, where it's so challenging to build for this very diverse ecosystem of Android devices. There are a lot of very tricky things to do in order to get high performance, great scrolling, make the camera work everywhere, and that's something where we were able to share a lot of information. But the key piece was focusing on how to integrate them in a way that kept Instagram, and I think that both they and we have done a pretty good job of that.
No, also in this conversation, I wanted to share some news with you regarding phone, and I wanted to announce basically that Qualcomm, a company that plays such a key role in the mobile world, both on mobile and on Wi-Fi, has become, has acquired a part of our company, and Qualcomm has joined our board. And I think what's interesting about Qualcomm is that they're at the heart of everything that is mobile. They're in our chipsets, they're in Wi-Fi, they're in mobile, they're in Snapdragon, and yet they're they're not a brand name, right? If I say before we're talking about Google buying it, I mean, all the brand companies, Facebook not a brand company, but for somebody like you, how do you coordinate with new devices coming up, a hectic ecosystem, new types of screens, new designs?
Very carefully. For those doing native development, you really have these two worlds that are very distinct. You have the Apple ecosystem in iOS, which is a very certainly planned and controlled ecosystem. Relatively small number of devices, relatively slow rollout of different devices. The change to iOS 7 this year was one of the most dramatic changes to iOS, and that took a fair amount of planning to hit. On Android, it's a little bit more of the Wild West. You have devices appearing all the time. The technology moves very quickly. I think if you look at a company like Qualcomm, part of what they do to really drive this ecosystem forward is not only are they building great chipsets and pushing hard to make GPUs and CPUs, the graphics and computation parts of phones faster and better and cheaper, they also release reference designs. These reference designs are incredibly important to the lower end, or frankly more typical part of Android, where having reference designs in the field moves all of Android forward really quickly. And so how we plan for that is we take advantage of the alpha and beta channels that the Google Play Store offers. So Android allows you to ship alpha and beta software to users, and we're fortunate to have a very large user base and a very large number of users who wish to engage. And so we actually release, on alpha, we release our native Android app 4 or 5 times a week. Our beta version 2 times a week. And this is a very, very high release rate for native mobile, and we're able to do that on Android because of the Play Store and because of having a really engaged user base.
And this is an audience of engineers, but it's also an audience of business people and designers. And I own, by the way, Facebook shares, and I follow Facebook closely also in my portfolio. So I was looking at Facebook, and I was saying the challenge of Facebook to go in mobile is how do you show advertising in mobile, right? And in that sense, Facebook nailed it, right? This advertising, which is part of the stream that comes on your mobile screen, the scrolling up of the advertising that I'm sure a lot of people at Google were also pretty shocked that something so obvious hadn't occurred to them. But can you tell us a little about how that developed, and also a little bit about the technology backend to both show the stream and bring the ads in?
So something you might know about Facebook's a newsfeed. So newsfeed is that first experience you have on Facebook of what everyone around you is doing, what your friends are doing.
People know.
And so with newsfeed, that's custom for every one of you every time you visit Facebook. So that the entire set of Facebook is recomputed for you every time you pull your phone out of your pocket and you open it, you hit the website. And so the good thing is we already had the computational resources to be able to make decisions about ad insertion into newsfeed, because frankly, that's what newsfeed is all about, is being able to bring the most relevant content to you. In terms of ads moving into feed, on the web, we had the right-hand column, and that's where advertising was on the web page. And when we made the decision to start exploring bringing content into newsfeed, that actually started, a year and a half ago at this point. And it started pretty simple. We had sponsored stories, we had sponsored pages, and it was a very small number. And what we found is when we could make those really relevant, they performed really well, they had no impact on sentiment, and because what people care about is relevancy. Right? The importance is being able to bring something to you that's really important. And so from there, it actually was the ads team, both on the sales side and on the technology side, saying, we have this new format that we really, advertisers were still learning, we were still learning, and it was really a joint effort for us to simplify what ads could go into it, and making sure that we could really manage how those were inserted and make sure that what we were showing you was relevant.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed because still if you use Facebook today, I think it's so much, the ads are so much better on mobile than on the web, right? I mean, the web seems to be, that team there seems to have to learn from your team, or maybe, like you said, you're only one team now. But what became more interesting and made Facebook more money is that the ads became more relevant and less annoying. So there must have been a lot of work that was done there. Then the other thing that Facebook has done, and that has benefited us at Phone, and I have a few routers here to give away after the freebie after the talk, is to authorize things with Facebook, right? And Facebook, because if you think about it, if you think about a company like PayPal, for example, PayPal is a company that is worth tens of billions of dollars who dealt only with one issue, which is annoying entering of credit card information. And I believe that in the Wi-Fi world, there's an annoying, one of the most annoying things about the Wi-Fi world is passwords, right? So Phone has made a system where you don't need passwords, but actually we have 12 million hotspots, 12 million phone members, but that's pretty many less than a billion, right? So we have a billion here on my left. And so we decided, hey, why don't we also make the phone routers Facebook enabled, so when your Facebook friends come up at home, you don't need a password. We check on the back end that they are your friends on Facebook, and they're authorized, and they don't need to ask you for your password anymore. But that effort, which is used by Phone, is used by many companies in many ways. So how are you expanding the whole authorization effort?
Well, I think we view it as one of the most important next challenges for us. You know, there's a pretty clear view of Facebook, which is we kept hitting these challenges that we weren't sure whether we could get past. And this dates all the way back to when Facebook was exclusively a college service. It was first considered crazy that it could go beyond that. And so it was initially, you know, for high school and then businesses, because it felt still small and contained, but it would never work for everyone. That was expanded to the entire US, and then the story became, well, this can't possibly work internationally. Then mobile. And the next one, and actually, you know, Jimmy touched on this in his talk earlier today, there are only a few billion people with persistent data connections in the world. When you look at that compared to the entire population, we have a tremendous opportunity ahead of us to increase how many people can have internet connectivity. And so the primary effort from Facebook is internet.org, and we're working with all sorts of partners to be able to push this. And I think being able to easily hop onto, for example, routers without having to remember the password or sign up or do anything is a huge advantage, both from an operator perspective, because it's moving bandwidth onto terrestrial backhaul, but also just from the usability of when you pull your phone out, you don't have to type in this long password. So I think it's something that's very important to us. We've been working with, you know, Wi-Fi routers, and it's exciting that we're going to be in Phone as well.
Thanks. No, we're happy with that. And you also have a Wi-Fi product that we will work on that is for shops. Would you like to comment on?
Well, it's the same basic idea that if you walk into a store that wants to offer you Wi-Fi, the last thing the operator or owner of the store wants to do is have you sign up for some extra service that you don't know how to use, or worse, have you not take advantage of the opportunity. And so being able to just do a Facebook check-in to have Wi-Fi is something that we're really excited about. And certainly the stores where it has gone into, it's worked out very well for them as well.
And I know you have to be gadget agnostic, let's say, because you want to work on all gadgets, but just the Cory, your own preference, which ones are the people who are making mobile gadgets who you admire the most?
Well, we were laughing because we had the same combination of phones in our pockets right now. So since I've been responsible for all of mobile, I'm constantly bouncing between iOS and Android. And on iOS, you know, I think that those are fantastic devices. The degree of polish and design and integration in Apple devices is fantastic. On the Android side, the Nexus 5, really strong device. Been very happy using that. But the one that in many ways I'm most excited about is the Moto Q. Here you have a device that at an unbelievably low price point gives you a great screen, a great CPU, plenty of storage, and that's going to change Android across the world because it's resetting expectations for what a typical Android device is going to be. And that, as we look out over the coming years, it's going to be, Jimmy talked about having his $60 phone. That's going to be the Moto Q next year.
Yeah, no, I'm also super impressed by that, but especially about the fact that by lowering the threshold, the next 2 billion people in the planet can join. So we're basically out of time now. I don't know if we had a little time for questions. One question? Okay, we have time for one question. I see one here.
All right. No pressure, one question.
It's a simple question. Martin, could you open one of these little boxes and show how it looks inside?
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. So this is what you'll be getting. It programs through mobile, and we only have 50, so I hope we don't have a stampede and you can get some yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.